Alright, how do we build a task tracker with the details of our task and a timer that tracks how long we've spent on the task? The features we want are to add a task, to edit the task's name and description, start, stop, reset the timer, store everything in local storage, and then once we're done with the task, drag and drop it in the completed section. That is a lot of functionality and a great learning exercise. So let's get started in setting up the project. npx create React app and the name of the project. Let's get Tailwind CSS installed as well, because it's just super easy to add the CSS into our project and very customizable. The first thing we want to do is to be able to add a task, and we'll do this through a modal. Modals are actually deceptively easy in React. We want to have a add new button, and when we click on the add new button, it will open up the modal. So let's create a components folder and add a new file, an add task component. Let's dress up the button real quick. Step 1 of that pop-up modal effect is to use state. We talked about it more in depth in the stopwatch videos, so I won't go over it again. Now that we have the add modal state, all we have to do is conditional rendering. When we click on the Add New button, we set the Add Modal to True, which opens up the modal, asking the user for the relevant details. That pop-up effect is simply done via some CSS. Overflow X hidden, fixed, inset 0. Let's set Z index as 100 just to be safe. The Z index determines what sits at the very top layer, and how the layers go on the web page. So you can use 50, 60, 70, but I like the number 100. When we click the X to close the modal, all we need to do is to set add modal as false, and that's it. And then we add the input field for the project name and text area for task description. Nothing complicated. When we click on Add Task, we also want the modal to close. So let's set Add Modal as false here as well. If you watch the to-do board video, you'll know that we'll need to add more functions to this Add button. But for now, we just need to know that the modal functionality works. Great. Now we need to set the project name and task description. Since the project name and task description are both user inputs, we can handle both together in one function, the handle input function. Let's handle the input in a slightly different way to the to-do board. Let's handle it before the return. Instead of grabbing the name and value separately like this, we can destructure it. So instead of 2 lines, we can do it in 1. And so we'll set the project name as the value of the project name as identified by the name, and do the same for task description. That's it. When we click on Add Task, what we want in reality is to add this new task to an array of pre-existing tasks. So let's do it how we did it for the to-do board. And just set the task list like this for now. We'll have to change it up a little bit once we get to local storage, but let's deal with that later. Now, once we map the task list array, there we go, we got it. Our two projects each with their own descriptions. Exactly as we did it for the to-do board, we'll create a to-do component to display the data how we want it to be displayed. I envisioned it as a card, but you can dress it up however you want. Step 2. Edit task modal. Of course, a task wouldn't be complete without the ability to edit and delete it. Since we did create task as a modal, it makes sense to do the same for the edit functionality. So we'll create an edit task component. Add in the edit button. Instead of add modal, let's change the state to edit modal. We can just copy across everything else from the add task module. Make sure we pass through the props that we need. And change the names. And down here, instead of handle add, let's call it handle update instead. In order to update the project name and task description, what we're doing is basically removing the pre-existing task and then adding a new task with the name and description we're adding now. So we get the index first. The safest way is probably doing an index off method, which is just a pure JavaScript method. We can also pass through the index from the map method in our parent app.js file. But if we wanted to mess around with the index order in our parent file, the index number passed through will no longer be accurate. So let's just use the index off method to be safe. And then we can use the splice method to remove the pre-existing task like this. The first parameter is to use this index number to identify from where you want to start removing items. We want it to start from the index number of that specific task. The number 1 is to specify how many items we want to remove. Just that one, so 1. If you want to replace that item, there is also an option of adding in a new item in its place in the third parameter. But in our case, for now, let's just focus on removing the item. And then set task list as we would before. Now, when we open up the edit modal, the input fields are both empty, which is not very helpful for when we want to edit a task. What we want to see is the existing project name and existing task description coming through. Bring on use effect. All we have to do is set the project name and task description of the task we've passed through as the project name and task description within our use effect hook. And when we open the edit modal, yay! There we go. How fun. When I mentioned messing around with the index order of our parent file before, here's an example of what we can do. Say we wanted to show the tasks in reverse chronological order. There are a few ways of doing this, one of which is to do slice and reverse. Again, just pure JavaScript methods. If we do this, it means that we can't use the index as the key anymore. Because look, when we click on edit, we see the details of the other task. So the index number is mixing up our tasks. If we change the key to another unique feature, let's say new date.getTime, for example, it's working the way we want it to now. And this just shows that if we want to change the order of display, messing around with the index number through a slice and reverse is probably not the best way forward. For a reverse chronological order, there is a much easier way, and we'll get to that a bit later. Let's just focus on the core functionalities for now. Step 3. Delete a task. After going through editing a task, deleting a task seems so easy, right? In a way, we've already done it. So go on, pause the video and have a go yourself. Yeah, you got it. We just need to get the index number from the item we want to delete. Use our nifty splice method. And then filter through the task list to show what's left after the removal. Fantastic. Step 4. Error handling. Let's do some basic error handling. At the moment, even when we add an empty task, it will show up as empty fields. It's fine, because we can edit it and delete it and whatnot, but it's not a very efficient use of anyone's time. So we can prompt the user to ensure that at least a project name is entered by some error handling on our end. We can do this by having an error message state. If the project name is empty, or if there is no project name when the user clicks on Add Task button, we show an error message in red saying Enter project name to continue. If the project name is not empty, then the message disappears. It's looking good. Step 5. Add stopwatch. Let's add in the stopwatch now. It's exactly the same as what we did in the stopwatch video. We just need to slot it in here. Let's add the hour as well, because being a freelancer myself, I often spend hours on a task, so it's very helpful to see. The hour is calculated by the time divided by essentially 1000 times 60 times 60. And then we modulo it by 24, I believe. Please point it out if I'm wrong. This is where testing comes in, which we should be doing. But in order to move on with the project, let's just overlook that small detail. React is still complaining about the key. I know why. Before we clean that up, let's remove the split and reverse methods, set the key back to the index again, because it's actually interfering with how the stopwatch time is being displayed. Every time a new task is added, everything re-renders and the time always gets reset back to 0. So let's avoid that. And now the React key issue is actually because of this fragment. If we remove the empty fragment, it'll go away. It should go away. Phew. Moving on. Step 6. Local storage. We love a bit of local storage, don't we? It's actually really easy. Let's prepare the data to be stored first, starting from when we're adding a task. Let's have a temporary list of the task list. Push a new task as an object into that array of tasks. Then all we need to do is local storage.setItem. Give it a name as a string. It can be anything. Think of it as an actual physical storage. You need a reference point as to where you're storing and retrieving your stuff, right? So in the same way, let's call this task list. And then we need to JSON stringify the data that's held in our temporary list. We will have to refresh the window for it to be seen. So let's just add window.location.reload. But not only that, all we've done so far is to put our data in local storage. We actually need to get our data to be able to see it. So we need to go back to our parent file and basically set our task list as the items we can retrieve from local storage. And which hook are we going to use? The useEffect hook. Let array equals local storage.getItem from the unit or shelf that we're calling task list. If there is an array, let's set task list as that array. We'll need to json.parse that array to convert it back into a JavaScript object. That's it. Now let's go into edit task and update the local storage data when we want to edit something. Remember when I was saying how we can add an item to replace what we're removing in the third parameter of the splice method? Let's do that. When we do local storage.set item, we can just JSON stringify the task list without creating another temporary list. Make sure you refresh the window. And in the application tab, we can see it's all stored correctly. Even if you refresh, no matter how many times you refresh, you'll still have the data. Now let's turn to the to-do component to update the duration of a task. Every time we click on stop, we want the duration of the task to be remembered in local storage. So let's break out the handle stop and bring it up here above the return. Set running as false still, but we'll need to tap into local storage to update the duration. Exactly how we did it for editing a task, just changing the value of duration to time. Set the task list as local storage item and reload window. Now that we have duration stored, we shouldn't need the set task list down here anymore. Let's comment it out for now, just in case. I always get a bit scared when I'm deleting a few lines of code in case I miss something, so let's just comment it out. Now that we have the duration stored safely, we can use a task's duration as the default value for our time, so that the timer continues instead of resetting to 0 every time we re-render. Step 7, drag and drop. Now the drag and drop. We've covered quite a lot already. So that we don't get overwhelmed by everything all at once, I'll just introduce how it's done and we can complete it in a project down the line. We can do drag and drop in pure JavaScript, but it gets very messy very quickly. I usually avoid libraries whenever I can, but the drag and drop is just not worth it. So I'm using React DND, link to the documentation below. Let's install it first according to its instructions. We need to wrap our top utmost layer of the element that we want to be able to drag and drop with DND provider that's part of the React DND package. Because we're working with quite a small project and we're doing everything in app.js, we can just go into our index.js and wrap it around our app component. This may not be the case in every single project. In most cases, you'd probably go into your app.js and wrap it around whichever component you need to wrap it around. So that's just something to note. We need to set backend as HTML5 backend from the React DND HTML5 backend package. We then need to identify exactly what we need to drag. For this project, it will be the task card in the to-do component. So we do useDrag from React DND. In our const, we set a Boolean variable of isDragging first, followed by drag, which is used to reference and identify which element you want to drag. Then in the callback function, we want to return some objects. The first one is a type. It needs to have a type. It can be anything you choose as a string. Because we're doing a to-do task, essentially, let's call it to-do. Remember to import useDrag from React DND. I always forget. Then we'll have a collect property that returns isDragging, and the Boolean monitor isDragging. The monitors let you update the props of your components in response to the drag and drop state changes. And finally, in our top div, that's wrapping everything in our to-do card, if we just put ref equals drag in curly braces, we should see a dragging motion. And we do! Amazing. Now, we need to think about where and how we're going to drop it. Let's go back to our parent file and create a column that will hold our completed tasks. we will need a completed state as well, which we will map each completed task into the same format as our to-dos. Now let's do the drop functionality. Similar to dragging, we have the Boolean variable of isOver and drop. In our callback function return of useDrop, we need the objects of accept. We have to accept the type that we set in our drag function. So we set it as to do, and here we'll accept to do. We also need drop, which is essentially what we want to do with the stuff that we're dropping. We want to add the object into our completed tasks array, so let's do that with a function. And finally, in collect, we monitor the status of the drag and drop, whether it's over. Don't forget to import useDrop from React DND. Now let's get to the specifics of the data we're passing from our drag to our drop. In our drag, we need an item object that we already referenced in our drop function. So in our item object, it's everything that we have in our task list really, with the addition of an ID. So we pass through the task ID. Project name, task description, timestamp, and duration. In our drop here, we've already grabbed the item. We just need to insert each property into our add to completed function like this in the parentheses. In our add to completed function itself, we'll add each of these as the parameters first. We filter through the task list and set our completed tasks. Add ref and drop in curly braces into the div that we want to move the card into, and that's enough for us to see that it's working. There we go. We can now drag and drop. Let's tidy up this bit of gap here. Whilst doing so, since we're wrapping the to-do column in a div, we can also artificially display the tasks in reverse chronological order via CSS, which in Tailwind CSS is just flex, call, reverse. As with all drag and drop, it kind of just copies across the data or image or whatever you're dragging and dropping, So there will always be two identical versions. You have to deal with the removal of the older one. We've done a lot of data manipulation today, so let's call it a day and I'll leave that as homework. There are a lot more you can add to this. For example, having an in progress column, applying status to each task, and once it's completed, based on its status, you can change its color, you can download a CSV file, or send the data to an email address that the user specifies. Let's get really creative. What is the most outrageous thing that you can do with a task tracker? Let me know what you come up with. Have fun. See you next time.